It's away from 8. Let's talk politics now with the leader of the Labour Party, Phil Goff, with us this morning. Morning, Phil.
Good morning, Wammo.
Are you well this morning?
Yeah, I am. We did good in the league, but we didn't do quite so good in the rugby. Other than that, it wasn't a bad weekend. The sun was shining.
Indeed it was. However, a bit of bad news at the end of the weekend. Another poll result, this time out from TV3, has Labour riding once again very low in the polls, and National could govern alone on those figures.
Yeah, it's a bit of a standstill poll, that one. It hasn't. The gap between the parties hasn't changed, and we'd want to do better than that, and we expect to do better than that. And I've got to say, the feeling on the ground is a whole lot better. We're getting around the country. We're talking to people about the policies. What we've got to do is get a focus on those policies in the lead up to the election itself. Because we think that the sort of things that we're talking about, not selling our assets, having a fairer tax system, first $5,000 income tax-free, they're the sort of policies that people are responding very positively to. We've got to convert that into support for the Labour Party.
Are you going to carry it all the way through to election day?
Oh, too right. There's no question about that.
Are you surprised at the tactics, though, from the National Party, where they are promising to renew support deals with minor parties, even though, based on the polling that is there currently, they could govern alone? They're not prepared to stand candidate in certain seats, like Peter Dunn's seat, just so that he can get back in, even though he has no support around the country.
Yeah. Well, I think that backs up my point. The National Party understand that what appears to be their lead in the poll doesn't translate automatically into an election victory. We saw that in 2002. We were 53% in the polls at the start of the campaign. By the end of the campaign, we won with a majority of only 42. Now, 42 in an MMP environment doesn't win an election for you. So, look, we're going to go out there. We're going to fight on the issues. We think that we've got good policy to put forward. We think that there is an underlying concern about, the fact that nobody's had the guts to take the hard decisions about how we get our economy back on track, how we make New Zealand more resilient, and we can do it. And John Key acknowledges that, because he's still scraping around making deals with Peter Dunn, who's a one-man band, with the Maori Party, with the ACT Party, to the extent of telling people not to vote for National in their electorate, but to vote for another party. Now, if he thought he'd had it sewn up, he wouldn't be doing that. But that sort of deal, I think, isn't really appropriate. You're telling people, no, don't vote for your own party. You're trying to instruct them what to do. I think there could well be a backlash against that.
Particularly on the ACT side, if National stood the right candidate in Epsom, they could obliterate ACT in the next election. Yeah.
Well, I think what they're looking for is a more right-wing party that will give them the excuse to do things that they don't go into the election promising. So if they go into a deal with ACT, they'll allow ACT to work out a deal. It might be on student loans, or it might be on something else that National doesn't want to promise the electorate because it knows it's unpopular, but it wants a pretext to do it after the election if they're safely elected. So, there's some political tactics in that as well. But if you're voting in a National government this time, it'll be a National ACT government, and it'll have Don Brash as part of that.
Yeah.
I don't think most people would want that, actually.
On to another very serious issue, tragedy in Afghanistan over the weekend with a New Zealand SAS soldier killed. The timeline is still to pull out in March. Of course, the SAS, it was only a few weeks ago, it came out and said that they're actually quite keen to stay there. Do you think the pressure is still going to be on to keep them out and remove them in March?
Well, the first thing I'd want to say is my deepest sympathy and condolences to the widow of the soldier who was killed in Afghanistan. I understand that there are young children in the family, and that makes it a personal tragedy, and I guess I know as well as anybody exactly how that feels. So our thoughts are with the family, and for that reason I haven't been debating the pros and cons of why we're still in Afghanistan, and I won't at this period of time. I think people know the position that we have taken, but Look, regardless of the merits of why the SAS is still there, here's a guy who died for his country in line of duty, and I think that's all we should focus on at the present time.
And absolutely, and I think everyone has the utmost respect for that, but the longer that the SAS are there, the more likely that this is going to happen again.
I think that is the inevitability of it when you've got... and the members of the SAS, and I know a whole lot of them personally, they understand that reality. The nature of what they're doing is incredibly dangerous, and there will be casualties. So,
one bit that puzzles me, though, is at what point did the SAS step up to have such a prominent combat role in Afghanistan? When did that happen?
Well, I think we were told initially that it was a mentoring role, and it's abundantly clear that that's not true.
And the government never sought the mandate from the New Zealand public to have a combat force in Afghanistan.
No, it was Labor that originally sent our people into Afghanistan way back in 2001 for the SAS, and 2003 for the Provincial Reconstruction Team, and there was good reason to do it at that time. Everybody remembers back to the tragedy of 9/11, Al-Qaeda being prominently based in Afghanistan. But the circumstances in Afghanistan have changed quite radically. We've been there now 10 years. That's twice as long as we were in the Second World War. And people need to see that there is an exit strategy, and they need to believe that what we're doing today requires us to be there, and those are the issues that in due course we'll get back to debating.
Okay, thanks very much, Phil.
Okay, thanks, Wammo. See you later, mate.
See ya.
Cheers.
Leader of the Labor Party, Phil Goff, there with